Okay, as we've said at the beginning of each class each week, this week's learning has been sponsored in memory of Rina Bat Rose and also Simcha Bat Sophia. So all the learning that we do is Li'ilui Nishmatan. We've been talking about electricity on Shabbat and various different ways that we might use it. And as we said, we're going through what the book says. Then some point next week, we're going to be able to stop and say, okay, let's have one overall class on how we understand all of this, because we're reading the book. The book is written 25 years ago, and maybe some things aren't here, and we need a general approach, which is not necessarily what he provides here. So anyway, mazkira elektronit. So he says an electric secretary, which I guess you would call an answering machine. So he says like this. אין להשאיר פתוח בשבת מזכירה אלקטרונית במערכת הטלפון אשר עונה לו על ידי תקליט לכל מי שמטלפן, והמטלפן משאיר את מספר הטלפון שלו מוסר את הודעתו, ויש בזה כמה טעמים לאיסור, ולכן צריך לנתק מערכת זו מלפני שבת. So he says you should not leave an answering machine on Shabbat. Now this is talking about the type of answering machine that most of us don't have anymore, which is a tape, where there's a tape recorder that's plugged into the phone, and you have to come and hit the playback button and so on and so forth. We're not talking about the current versions of answering machines, but he says the number one reason that he's concerned about is that Jews are going to be calling, and Jews are going to be using the answering machine, and you're helping them use it. That's like a big deal. And he says, since if you're not concerned about that, then it's less of a problem, and some opinions would allow it. He says, as we said yesterday, he said that you don't even want to have the phone plugged in your house on Shabbat. He wants you to unplug the phone. And he said, why is that? He says he doesn't want there to be ringing phones in your house. He says, partly for you, where it's easy for you to forget and go pick up the phone. He says, even if you live in a place where the neighbors will, which again, if you live in an apartment building or something like that, the neighbors are going to hear phones ringing on and off. They're going to think, oh, this guy answers the phone on Shabbat. We don't want that either. So okay, like I said, we're gonna have to bring some of this into our own world today, because answering machines don't work that way anymore. And even if they did, I'm not so sure I would agree with some of the things that he states here. But just wanted to put out there that that's what he's saying. Okay, next he goes to a fax, right? Which a fax machine also is something that 20, 25 years ago was all over the place, and it was a great advance in technology. And today, how many of us use a fax machine? Not so much, right? I don't want to say it doesn't exist. It does, but it doesn't work the same way. And it's not, most things are digital, right? No, and I don't know if anyone's seen the fax paper in a while. I don't know if you remember the machines used to come out with the rolled up paper. Okay. He says like this, Asur l'shtamesh b'Shabbat b'mechonat fax gam im arach ota v'nicha petucha erev Shabbat. He says you can't use a fax machine even if you set it up from before Shabbat, right? So let's say the machine's on, I didn't touch anything, and now all of a sudden a message comes in the middle of Shabbat. You're not allowed to read that message, to pull the paper out of the machine or anything like that. So an example of that might be, we can talk about this. Let's say today you have your computer has a printer connected to it, right? And you could have a setting that when your email comes in, right, that the computer automatically prints the email, right? Would be very, very similar. So it sounds like that would not be allowed. Similar would be, I get my morning edition of the Wall Street Journal, or something like that, right? It comes in, it's not ready at 6 o'clock in the afternoon when Shabbat starts, right? And now at 4 in the morning or whatever time they release it. It has an automatic, and it comes out to my printer, right? So it seems like that would not be allowed on Shabbat, which is interesting because if that's not allowed, why would it be allowed for me to get the newspaper, right? How is that any different, or maybe it's even worse? So we'll I don't know if we're going to get to that, but we'll say that the newspaper is not a problem. Okay. Delet chashmalit. So now one of the things that we know we have to talk about, because it applies to us if you live in Turnberry, Porta Vida, or some other place like that in Florida. Most of those buildings have electric doors to get into the building. How do we deal with the electric doors? He says like this: Delet haneftahat automatit be'emtzaut chashmal, or delet haneftahet ketotzah madricha. He says there's two basic types of electric doors. Either there's an electric eye, the red dot that senses something is coming, says, or there's a mat that you step on, that you find in the supermarkets more often. Asur lavor darka b'Shabbat, says you can't go through it on Shabbat. Kevan shenichnas vayotze maf'il zerem chashmal b'zman shemitkarev elea. Says because when you do it, you directly cause an electric flow to happen, and so therefore you're not allowed to use those doors, and you can't go through those doors. He says, and how much more so if when you open the door, it turns on some kind of light or something like that. Turning on a light, a bulb or something, makes it much, much worse. So that's what he says. Hold on, I'm going to keep going. Asur likanes labayit shemutkan sham delet shekasher nichnasim labayit v'neftechat hadelet פעמון חשמלי מצלצל בתוך הבית פנימה, כדי שבני הבית ידעו שנכנס אדם לבית, וכן אסור לצאת מהבית, כי הפעמון מצלצל שוב פעם כשיוצאים. He says another thing you're not allowed to do. He says if you have, as many places have, when you walk in, there's a sensor, and the sensor lets people know that someone's there by making a sound, a bell or something like that. He says, well, that's a problem too. You can't have something that causes a bell to go off. So that's a problem. I don't know too many people that have that in a home, but certainly in places of business and other things like that, you will definitely see such a concept. So he says you can't go and create that to have that happen.
Rabbi, the alarm system, when you open the door, it has a little beep, so you got to turn that. You have to turn off.
So he would say that you would have to turn off. Yesh lahachmir milikanes b'Shabbat l'bayit asher kayemet matzlema liyad hadelet. ומצלמת את כל הדופק בדלת, כדי שידעו בני הבית מיהו האיש הרוצה להיכנס לביתם. So he is strict on something else that is now ubiquitous, which is, he says, if there's a camera that is capturing pictures of a person, so the capturing pictures is a problem, and because it's writing it down somewhere, or something like that. And so he says you cannot walk through a front door that there's a camera that's recording you walking in order to do that, which is a stringent.
If the camera's constant recording, it's okay?
So he doesn't say that. And again, as I said, this book is more stringent than I think what we're going to end up saying. But what we're getting out of all of this is, if you, without a serious reimagination of how we understand how this all works, what do we do, right? Like there's until you start sitting down and making the list of the things that are impacted by this halacha, you don't fully appreciate. You say, okay, I'll unplug something, I'll do this, I'll do it a little this way, I'll do it a little that way. But once you start going through the list, as you're seeing, it's like, hey, wait a second. How do we do that, right? Like, in Florida, right? Like I mentioned the electric eye door, right? So you could say, look, there's also a doorman by many of the buildings. So maybe I'll tell the doorman, I'll tell, we'll me or getting together with all the other Jewish people in the building, we'll say, we'll give you a few dollars, and you'll remember when someone walks in, on Shabbat, you open the door, right? And you make sure, which that assumes that's allowed, but okay. you'll do that, right? Okay, right. And if an answering machine is a problem, okay, so I'll pull out the plug on Shabbat. And if the doorbell automatic, okay, I won't do that, But it starts becoming more problematic as it becomes harder to stop some of the things, and even harder to find some of the things. They're just out of our control, right? And if we're talking about electric cameras, right? So hey, wait a second, don't we have security cameras in the shul, right? Isn't that all about protecting the shul and being in a good place, and so on? Just as an aside, I'm in more than a few chats on shul openings and what have you, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of back and forth, and a lot of people are running to open the shul. So one of the things that people are saying is, well, let's have outdoor minyanim, right? We'll do it in the parking lot and the thing, and so one of the guys goes, listen, I don't mean to be facetious, but I just have a serious comment. He says, less than a year ago, right, this chat was all about making sure everyone was behind bulletproof glass, right? No one could be, 3 steps outside. We're using the phone on Shabbat. It says, and now you're going to go and have a parking lot minyan and everyone's outside, and you're okay with that? So it's just interesting. I don't want to say how it all worked out or whatever, but it's funny how perspectives can change, and just something to think about. Okay, like I said, I'm really going to be providing more questions than answers for a couple of days. Probably today and Monday, and then or today and Tuesday, because Monday I think we'll do the Sunday schedule because of Memorial, but by Tuesday, Wednesday next week, we'll have. I'm working on putting together like a full how we deal with electricity on Shabbat thing. So we'll get to that. So he says like this, and we'll be able to answer a lot of these questions and problems that we have to deal with.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Every Friday they turn off all the, when we used to go to shul, they turn off all the cameras on Friday in shul?
Not by Bnei Yitzhak, no.
Oh, okay.
No, that's a big reason why Shabbat is, if I see IG's on the thing and he's my retailer, Neil was a retailer. Shabbat is Christmas for us. We can't, we have to, that's when it matters. If you're not going to have the cameras for Shabbat, what am I having it for Thursday night class? It's not really where the security issues take place. So we'll talk about it. It's definitely, I believe me, I appreciate that as I'm reading and saying some of the things that he's been saying here, I say, hold on one second. Does that make sense? Can we do that? And again, remember the point that I was making while I was telling this off story is perspectives change. The way things work then and the way things work today are very different, even if there's a lot of similarity, right? You could unplug your answering machine, right? Would you know how to stop your answering machine now, right? Your voicemail. I wouldn't. I don't know if you can. But we're not, is someone going to do that, right? You're going to not have your voicemail on your phone. It's very hard, right? The cameras, we're going to power all the cameras down on Shabbat, even if we could do that, because if you think about how many cameras, right? Just show of hands, how many of you have cameras in your homes, right? How many of you have security cameras, right? Multiple, right? Do you know how to shut them off, right? And would you shut them off? What's the point of the cameras if not? So these types of things, and there are others as we're getting to, we talked about the other day, the camera on my, garage in the backyard, right? The light goes on automatically when someone walks by. So what do I do? I guess I could figure out how to undo that, but it would be very challenging, right? And to do every week, very difficult, so okay, let's keep going. There's a bell. A bell, he says, you're not allowed to ring a bell like, the ding, 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 the one that you would use, on the teacher's desk or something like that. The dry cleaners, always reminds me of that. You can't use a bell on Shabbat. He says, and you certainly can't use an electric one. He says, טעה ולחץ על כפתור של פעמון חשמלי, ובעודו לוחץ נזכר ששבת היום, יש להתיר לו לרפות ידו מן הכפתור, כיוון שאין כאן גיבוי גמור אפילו מדרבנן, אלא רק הפסק כוח אלקטרי, וכן אפשר להתיר לרפות ידו, כיוון שיגרם לו צער גדול בזיונים. He says, let's say you, which is funny case, he says, say you press the bell on Shabbat, right, and you say, oh, it's Shabbat. He says, am I stuck holding the bell, right? Can I unpull my, he says, no problem, you could pull your hand off. He says, he says, however, he says, if there's a light that you press, and when you let go of the light, the light is going to go off. He says, oh no, that's a problem, and you have to hold your finger there, which is absurd. Right? I mean, what are you going to tell the guy? You're going to hold your finger? So the truth is, he's quoting. I see what he's quoting. He's quoting an Ashkenazi opinion on this, which is a very famous Ashkenazi opinion. I will say sometimes Ashkenazim are much more stringent in ways that just don't make sense to us. What are you going to tell the guy? Stand, but I mean, you press the door, right? You know, I came to visit IG. I pressed the button, and because I thought I didn't think it was Shabbat, and now I realized, oh, it's Shabbat, and so I'm going to stand by his house for the rest of the day, you know, and a whole lot. It's absurd, but what I'll say is Shabbat is important, and keeping Shabbat is important. And even though I wouldn't agree with such a statement, I would understand, hey, the halacha is the halacha, and you have to go with the technicalities and the legalities, and that would be what it would say. Okay, we have to figure out how to understand halacha so that doesn't work, because halacha would also care that I'm not stuck standing by a doorbell for 12 hours or whatever it may be. So we'll come to this. Next, a microphone, ramkol. Asur l'shtamesh beramkol b'Shabbat, o lashmiya tefillah bet knesset al yedei haramkol, afilu shulchan l'kol pratam erev Shabbat. He says you're not allowed to use a microphone on Shabbat. Actually, there's a synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue in the city that allows a microphone on Shabbat. They have it set up from beforehand. I don't want to say which one, but I know the name of the synagogue, and it's a real Orthodox synagogue. It's a very old one, and it's been around for it's one of the original synagogues in America, and they dealt with this issue a long time ago. And at the time, they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with it. They started using it, and then they never stopped. You know, and the tradition was the tradition. And they're not silly. They know the rules, and they leave it. They set it up. No one touches it, and so on and so forth. And it's very intriguing that that's the case.
Rabbi, I remember in shul, Saul Kraham said that in Egypt they used to use a microphone till Chacham Ovadia Yosef came to visit them in Cairo, and then he told them that it was not allowed, if I remember correctly.
Again, a lot of the older shuls, why a microphone is not allowed. It's not so simple. And of course, we won't use a microphone in shul on Shabbat. But if I have to explain to you why I can't use a microphone on Shabbat, it becomes a lot more complicated. I'll just give you a quick question, right? That'll show you the complication, and we'll come back to this next week, right? Can a person wear a hearing aid, right? How many of you know people that wear hearing aids, right? I know a bunch, right? Maybe one of you wears a hearing aid, right? What's the difference? Right? You're not going to have an easy time finding a difference between a hearing aid and a microphone. And are we going to tell all the people who have hearing aids they can't wear hearing aids? I'm not making that statement. So a microphone, all of a sudden, once you look at that, right now, look at the shuls in Egypt or the one in the city, and you say, hey, okay, I understand that. So I'm not saying we should have a microphone in shul. We're not having a microphone in shul on Shabbat, but it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. So that's his next topic is machshir shmi'ah. He says a hearing device, a hearing aid. He says people that have a hard time hearing. He says, and there's they have a hearing aid in their ear. It receives the sound and then amplifies it in their ears. Yesh latir l'shtamesh ba im mechinim otam erev Shabbat. He says they could wear it if it's all set up before Shabbat. V'chen yesh latir latzet ba l'rshut harabim. He says, and you don't have to worry about carrying it on Shabbat. Im efshar lo lalechet zulata b'shum ofen. If you can't walk without it. Ubuvad shetek shura le'oznayim hetev. But it's got to be in there good. L'lo chashash shetipol li'avol hagbia b'rshut harabim. You don't want it to be something that could fall out, and then you carry it in a public place where there's no eruv. V'nachon latet me'erev Shabbat niyar devek al hakavtor v'hamaf'il et hamachshir k'dei shelo yavo lafsik et pulato b'Shabbat. And he wants you to put like some kind of piece of tape over it so you don't press the button up or down. So as you could see, he didn't really explain why it's different. And he does say that you can use a hearing aid on Shabbat. So we're going to stop here, and we'll talk about a couple of other things that are very significant, like an elevator, an escalator, and a car. Those are the last three topics that he talks about. So we'll get to that on on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday we're going to do a whole, how do we do electric on Shabbat? How do we deal with all the things? And, that's our next topic. Anyway, all today's learning was Leiluy Nishmat, Yinat Bat Rose, Bat Sophia. Thank you for the sponsorship for the whole week.
Rabbi, question.
Yes.
In my apartment in Florida, if you open the back door for the six, the lights go on.
Right. So that's a perfect example of what we've been talking about. So we're gonna talk about a number of things. That's all. I'm gonna answer as much as possible on Wednesday. You could see why it's a problem, right? Up until now, we've been saying it's a problem. So don't go to Florida between now and Wednesday. But,
Rabbi, so class is Tuesday
Cancel
morning?
my private jet.
okay. Tuesday we'll come back. Monday we're gonna do the 8:15. Minyan, it's Memorial, so we'll do a late arrival on Monday.
Okay. Hazako Baruch. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Okay.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Bye, guys.
Have a good day, Isaac.